the setting of Fallen, or of the first book, takes place in Savannah, Georgia. And so I went to school in Georgia for undergrad, and I wasn't in Savannah's a really particular place. It's very different from like the urban Atlanta where I was living for those years. But I went to Savannah several times and just really felt the place like stick to my skin. And that's not just the humidity, but like there's something about it that is so tactily, I don't know, just it's a really extreme setting. And I was kind of thrilled and fascinated by it. So it just was sort of sitting in my back pocket as like a place to eventually explore. And then I started writing Fallen when I was towards the end of my graduate program. I stumbled into a literature course at the university that was about reading the Bible as literature. So like instead of studying it from a religious perspective, studying just like the literary explorations of, mostly Genesis. We got pretty far into it. But it was such an amazing, mind-blowing course to get to. I was, grew up very familiar with the stories of the Bible, but hadn't ever considered them, the craft of them and the real beauty of them. And I mean, I'm so interested in like actually how the text came to be, the different writers, the different voices, the editors who made the final selection in 76 AD. I mean, just the whole thing to me is incredibly fascinating. Anyway, the first day of the class, the professor was just reading from early Genesis, and she was talking about the moment where the sons of God, so these are the angels, look down from heaven, see the daughters of man, that's mortal women, and think that they are beautiful. And that's all the line says. But what the professor suggested was that this moment when angels put something above their adoration of God, kind of got sidetracked by looking at mortal women, this moment of lust or love, whatever you want to call it, might be the reason that God casts Lucifer and the fallen angels out. And so I thought, wow, like what a sacrifice to make for love, like what a beginning of a love story that then you got to go and see, like, was it worth it? And to give up your place in heaven, to give up your identity as an angel, your immortality, whatever, all of the stuff. I wanted to find the girl who would make that sacrifice worth it. And so that's where Fallen came from.
From the standpoint of creating Lucinda Luce Price, and then of course she meets Daniel Grigori. There's others that come into the supporting cast, but those two lead characters, starting with Lucinda, for fans of hers, would you talk a little bit about was that an amalgam of people that you had met, or just her creation, her character creation?
Yeah, she's based on one person. She's based on my oldest and dearest friend, who I met at the age of 3 and is still my closest friend. And I think that, physically, I just knew kind of the way that everything about the physicality of somebody you're deeply intimate with. I knew what happened to her shoulders when she got stressed out. And I knew what percentage of humidity made her hair do that really weird thing. And I knew exactly what her eyes looked like when she'd gotten, 3 hours of sleep versus 8 hours of sleep. And so there were all of those little tiny details that I pulled from my friend Megan and put into Luce's physicality. But very quickly, she turned into her own character. And I really struggled with Luce's character, actually. Multiple drafts it took me to even kind of get near her. I think because I was writing her at a very happy time in my life. Like I had just gotten engaged when I started writing this story. And it was hard for me to get into the dark place that this character had to be in for the story to work. Her name suggests her arc. She's moving over the course of the story towards the light, but when Fallen begins, and really for much of like the first book, she's in torture. She's facing some really dark things and doesn't know that there is a light out there waiting for her. So it took me a while to get her character. And really it was just, I think, getting honest with myself about like letting her come alive, letting her dictate. I think in the first draft of that book, if I can remember, like she wanted to do things differently than I wanted her to do them. And so I had my plan, using my pseudonymous novels as a guide. I had a chapter outline, chapter 1, chapter 2, and but around chapter 8, she kind of just wouldn't do the thing I needed her to do to get me to chapter 9. And it really felt I hadn't had that experience with a character before. I hadn't really been inventing a character whole cloth before, because my previous novel, like just Lady Macbeth, just make it work. And then the other ones, the character had been created for me by someone else. So this was the first time I was building someone, and I think I felt like I should take more control over it. And really the opposite is true. And now I know the sooner you can let go of the reins and give the character the opportunity to make the decisions for you. I mean, I know I'm talking as if there are actually multiple people inside of me, but it does feel like that. It feels like a subconscious experience. Like there is someone who is not me making these choices, saying these things, and I have to just kind of shut up long enough and get still long enough to be able to hear them.